Good evening.
Evening.
For one of you, at least, it is. All right. This is a little bit unusual, what we're going to be doing tonight. Instead of having a regular sermon, I suggested this idea of having more of an open forum discussion to go along with our series on the subject of elders. And depending on how many of these we have depends on how this one goes. If it doesn't get a lot of interaction or it's just a total failure, then we probably won't do very many more. But if this is productive and we learn some things from this about elders and how we're supposed to go about appointing them and what elders are supposed to do, we might have some more of this to come. I asked everyone for a couple Sunday mornings in a row to submit questions ahead of time, and I got one question after services this morning, and then I got a bunch more right before this one started, so we're going to try to tackle a few of those. The first question I got was, how well should a congregation know elders before appointing them? And vice versa, how well should elders know a congregation before they are appointed? And the Bible doesn't really, to my knowledge, have a specific book, chapter, and verse that actually answers that. But nevertheless, I do think we can figure out the answer by looking at the Scriptures. We read the passages in Titus and Timothy this morning, and I'll just reread them for our benefit here. In Titus chapter 1, verses 5 through 9, it says, "For this reason I left you in Crete, that you would set in order what remains and appoint elders in every city as I directed you. Namely, if any man is above reproach, the husband of one wife, having children who believe, not accused of dissipation or rebellion. The overseer must be above reproach as God's steward, not self-willed, not quick-tempered, not addicted to wine, nor pugnacious, not fond of sordid gain, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, just, devout, self-controlled, holding fast the faithful word which is in accordance with the teaching, so that he will be able both to exhort in sound doctrine and to refute those who contradict." And in 1 Timothy chapter 3, in verses 1 through 7, it is a trustworthy statement. If any man aspires to the office of overseer, it is a fine work he desires to do. An overseer then must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, prudent, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not addicted to wine or pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. He must be one who manages his own household well, keeping his children under control with all dignity. But if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how will he take care of the church of God? And not a new convert, so that he will not become conceited and fall into the condemnation incurred by the devil. And he must have a good reputation with those outside the church, so that he will not fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. Now, based on just those passages, what would you say is the thing congregations must know about elders before appointing them? How well should they know them? Yeah. But specifically, it's not a matter of, do you know whether or not he likes seafood, or do you know what his favorite color is? You know, what is he above reproach? Don.
You know a lot about
That's the key. Character. You know his character. Do you have something?
Sounds like it would be good to know his family.
Sounds like it would be good to know his family too. After all, he has to have faithful children, believing children, and we haven't gotten to that part of the series yet, but I do take faithful children in Titus 1 to mean that he has to have children that are Christians and that they do believe Jesus Christ. This idea that, he can be faithful to his parents without being faithful to God is frankly a false dichotomy. If his parents are Christians, it seems logical that being faithful to them also means he's faithful to God. Don.
Also, to go in that direction would be
Right, exactly. Fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord, Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. And the implication here is that we need to be able to know elders well enough to know their character to say whether or not they are beyond reproach. Now, the question of how well we should know them, I think, is followed up with this idea, how long should we know them? Well, and to that, I don't think you can really stick a number on that. The Bible doesn't give us a place to say that we can stick a number on that. I'll point us to an example in Acts chapter 14. In Acts chapter 14.
You know very, very well. You know me very, very well. But you know me as well as I know him. And without that, it'll be a failure to start.
Right. Yes.
If everybody has to know the elder has to know everybody.
You bring up an interesting question, and I'll address this in just a moment, of what did the elders have to know literally every single 100% person in the congregation before they can appoint them?
That's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm saying that he has to make an effort. The elder's job is not easy.
Amen to that.
It could be very difficult. And he has to be the type person that can look at me and see what my needs are. And he has to look at you and see what your needs are. And he has to recognize these things. And if he can't do that, then he's not elder material.
Well put. Well put. Another passage that we are going to get to on this is in Acts chapter 14. And one of the big examples in the Bible of where they appointed elders. And in Acts chapter 14, in verses 21 through 23, does anybody offhand know what the context of this is? In Acts 14.
Where Paul gets stoned in Lystra.
Yes, Paul does get stoned in Lystra in Acts chapter 14. This is the context of his first missionary journey. He travels to Antioch, to Iconium, to Lystra, to Derbe, basically all the churches in Galatia. And when he's traveling there, in verse 21, they preached the gospel to that city. They made many disciples. They returned to Lystra and to Iconium and to Antioch, strengthening the souls of the disciples, encouraging them to continue in the faith, and saying, "Through many tribulations we must enter the kingdom of God." When they had appointed elders for them in every church, having prayed with fasting, they commended them to the Lord in whom they had believed. So how long did these churches exist in Galatia before Paul and Barnabas appointed elders there? Not for very long. It raises a question then. If these churches didn't exist that long, how well did these people know each other? And for that matter, how well did they know their elders?
Yeah, but they had powers.
Well,
We don't have. They could look at a man similar and say they were. I said they were similar to the powers that God had. He could read a man. He could tell what was inside him. He could not have been told to, and God knew this, that he couldn't just walk in and say, "Okay, Joe and Jack, you're going to be elders." He read their mind. He read their hearts. They had to do that, and we have to do that too. Only we're not quite that small.
we don't have ability to read minds or hearts. Gail, you have something.
I don't, I'm
The apostles appointed them, huh?
not, there you go.
Well, then there's a question, this is another question that got brought up to me right before we started, of who exactly appoints elders. And we don't have apostles today, unless, somebody's very, very old, still walking around. But
Apostles didn't always.
the apostles did not always appoint the elders either.
The preacher did.
I'm a little bit wary of the idea that just the preacher unilaterally said, okay, Smith, Bob, and Jones, you're now the elders, and that's it. That's not exactly what happened. There's clearly a matter of looking at the man's character, looking at, what the congregation even knew about the man's character, and making an informed judgment, an informed decision based on that, and based on what Paul wrote to Titus and to Timothy both. He gave them instructions. And so it's not like there's some magical process behind this that we can't duplicate, like the Holy Spirit gave them something that He didn't give to us. He gave something to us. He gave us the Scriptures. Because the Spirit has given us the Scriptures, He has given us what Paul wrote to Titus and Timothy both. And because we have what Paul wrote to Titus and Timothy both, we can take the same criteria and apply it to elders. Now these churches here in Galatia, well, there's another thought that comes to mind as well. These were the early Christians, were mostly people that were Jews who had realized the fulfillment of their Messiah, combined with a Gentile congregation as well. And as a result of that, it's likely that a lot of the early elders were not new converts, quote unquote, so much as they were Jews who had realized the culmination of their religion. They'd waited for the Messiah their whole life, and the Messiah came, and they accepted Him. That's not really a conversion at all. That's, just realizing that what God has promised has come to fulfillment. And because of that, it's likely, and I don't know if this was the case in every place, but it is likely that most of the early elders in the early first century church were in fact Jews who had accepted Christ as the Messiah, the Lord, and were now still serving that role over congregations. Yes, Don?
Well, being consistent with what Paul wrote to Titus, the guys didn't have to prove. The guys that were appointed elders, they didn't have to prove what the scriptures had to say. It's very inconsistent with Paul wrote to Titus and Timothy.
Right. Keith, you have something?
I think what's important for us to understand is the fact that the apostles ordained elders. We need to understand the term. People chose them. All taught the work, and the people chose them. All taught the responsibility. Where does it say that? When you look at...
Well, that's 1 Timothy and Titus is basically teaching.
These men had to be taught the Lord. They had to be taught the Lord. And the people looked out among them, perhaps like they did in the book of Acts about the widow.
Well, in a sense, they're written to individuals, but the churches would have been made aware of them. And it's clear from reading Timothy and Titus both, he uses some plural forms throughout. It's like, this isn't a secret letter that I'm writing to Timothy and Titus. This is the whole church needs to be aware that I'm telling you this, by the way. That's the impression. And that's a complex issue, but...
It's a letter to broadcast.
Well, yeah, it's a letter to be broadcast. I think the technical term is a mandata principis, which I don't know the exact meaning of that, but it is understood that Timothy and Titus, even though they were written primarily to the evangelists, the churches they were at would still have been aware of what was in these letters, just like we're aware of what's in these letters. I'm sensing that you're not completely on the same page here.
He knew that wherever he sent people were ready to have those proceed with God. He knew that. He wouldn't have sent them out there if he hadn't known that. And I'm sure he talked a long time to the folks that he sent out there. He wouldn't have sent them out there doing it. He was very careful about what he did because he had a man looking down on him, seeing that the thing he told these folks was correct and the right thing to say. And they knew after talking to him which ones to play. And doing that, you got to go right to people. We're not that smart.
Keith, you had something?
I was just going to say that Paul, as an apostle, had to teach the people why the role of the elder was needed in the church, what his work was, how it related to the people, and why they need it. The elder is the shepherd, the people are the sheep. And when you use that analogy, you have to teach somewhat that analogy for the people to understand their need for these offices, for men to be appointed in these offices. It appears as well from the scriptures that he had to prepare these men for the work of an elder. And therein comes the term ordained. He prepared these men, taught them what not only these men, but taught the people what the work was. These people perhaps have been together for a time, and they knew these men. And when he taught these qualities or qualifications, they would point to somebody. And what he did was perhaps continue to prepare them for the work if they had the desire to do the work. Which is much the same that we do today. That's why we have these classes, both from the pulpit and interaction. questions.
Don, you had something.
Okay, there's not a whole lot of dissimilarity between the elders in the Old Covenant.
Yes, there. Somebody sees what I see.
And he was selecting them from the Jews that were older and seasoned and figured out that, yes, this is the culmination of my business. Jesus is the promised Messiah. So these guys would have been natural in that sense. And they would have understood these qualities of man, and they would have been practicing them as well as they could have.
There is a reason why, I mean, you see them talk about elders need to be this and such in Titus and Timothy both, but you never see them explaining in detail what the work of an elder is throughout the New Testament. Not really, because it's already assumed based on what was written in the Old Testament. So you cannot, and I believe this very firmly, you cannot understand the work of an elder without understanding what it was in the Old Testament. Lord willing, we'll have some more lessons on that in the future. But
I can throw one at you. Jeremiah chapter 10 and verse 21.
well, there's a whole host of passages in Jeremiah, but
Well, this one, I think, points to us to be careful about who the elders may be. For the shepherds have become stupid and have not sought the Lord. Therefore, they have not prospered in all their flock and scattered.
Yep, well, there you go. I'm getting back to the question. We have gone a little tangent-wise on this, but I would say one final thing, and this is building on what Jim said earlier about the need, how we have and to make an effort to get to know people. That is really an obligation of everyone here, an individual responsibility of every member of this congregation to be members of one another. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul writes this. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, beginning in verse 12. Even as the body is one, and yet has many members, and all the members of the body, though they are many, are one body, so also is Christ. For by one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, whether Jews or Greeks, whether slaves or free. We were all made to drink of one Spirit. For the body is not one member, but many. If the foot says, because I am not a hand, I am not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any less a part of the body. If the ear says, because I am not an eye, I am not a part of the body, it is not for this reason any the less a part of the body. Can there be members in this church who are excluding themselves from each other's activities? Or excluding themselves from each other's lives? No! If the whole body were an eye, where would the hearing be? The whole were hearing, where could the sense of smell be? They don't all do the same thing, do they? No. Verse 18, but now God has placed the members, each one of them, in the body, just as He desired. If they were all one member, where would the body be? But now there are many members, but one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, well, I have no need of you. Or again, the head to the feet, I have no need of you. On the contrary, it is the much truer that the members of the body which seem to be the weaker are necessary. Those members of the body which we deem less honorable, on these we bestow more abundant honor. Our less presentable members become much more presentable, whereas our more presentable members have no need of it. But God has so composed the body, giving more abundant honor to that member which lacked, so that there may be no division in the body, but that the members may have the same care for one another. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Now think about the implications of that for a second. As a congregation, it's not just an organization like the Rotary Club. The word members is being used in the sense of talking about body parts. And whenever you hurt your thumb, where is all of the attention in your body directed? To your thumb. And whenever something joyful happens, the body is focused on that. As members of one another, we are to be, in essence, more like an organism than an organization. That means we suffer together and we rejoice together. And if we're doing that as a congregation, is there going to be people here who we don't know well enough to say whether they're beyond reproach or not?
I think, I've been in the church, I've told you before, many, many, many years. I think time comes to select someone. I think we'll know, because we would select someone direction. Can he be this person that I want to be the shepherd over me? I think we will know that. And I don't know that we have anybody in here right now that is. You'll know these things. You just know this man would make a good overseer of the church. But the elders are not going to come in here and straighten out all of our problems. Bang, 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 bang. I can tell you that.
Don Garner, you have something.
In agreement with what Jim just said, the way we'll know is when the time comes, we need to pray about it, and we'll let God guide our thoughts and our minds.
Amen.
Let them make the choice. We need to pray about it.
More important than these lessons that I'm preaching is the fact that everyone here needs to be praying about this, big time.
Pray for God's guidance and His direction in the election process. And that's how we'll know.
Right. And that's the big thing is, and we're praying about it. We need to pray that we find qualified men. And if by chance we don't have qualified men, we need to pray that people will grow up to become that the Lord will grant us that. We need to be constantly working towards it. These things don't get done without prayer. It's just a fact. All right, that's mostly what I have on all of that. The fact of the matter is that we all need to be involved in each other's lives. And, yes, Don?
Just one other thing. Read about Acts where they went to the elders, see where Paul was Titus and Timothy, necessity to have. It's highly important that there are elders. Now, whether there's men qualified or not, question. Each congregation needs elders. To be scripturally complete. To be complete before God according to the Scripture.
Right.
I don't know if anybody's qualified or not. Aware of it, looking into it, we can at least determine whether we have men who are capable of serving in that capacity, given the qualities of the man.
Now, and the fact of the matter is if we don't know whether or not there's qualified members among us or not, well, that says something about us as a congregation. And what do we do about it? Well, we get to know each other. We spend more time together, That means, obviously we should be at all the assemblies. I'm not going to preach to the choir on this one here, but, furthermore, we should be in each other's homes. We should be, participating in each other's lives. Is the time here on Sunday the only time we see our brethren? Shouldn't be. No.
See what has to happen. You, the congregation, these people that we consider to be elders, we will consider maybe in our mind, but nobody else. But we have to consider that is this person a person we would want to oversee the congregation, and will they accept these elders, these people that are not elders, accept these people that we select to come in here and say, okay, this is what we want to do, this and this and this and this. And you've got to have the congregation to accept them. If they don't, we're going to have them.
The congregation submits to people who are if the congregation won't submit to people who are elders in name, are they really elders? James, you have something.
I'm slightly confused here. Are we supposed, or the members of the congregation, are we supposed to, what's the word I'm looking for? Say there's I don't know how to say it. Are we supposed to want a specific man? If there's a...
Are we supposed to shoehorn a specific man in, or... Well, the answer to that's no, but...
Yeah. I had in my head, I know what I want to say.
Keep thinking about it. We're going to come back to
My
it.
tongue.
Oh, well, while you're thinking about that, I want to get your other question in, unless anybody's got anything else on this. Gail, did you have something? No? Okay. Another question that was asked was, how old is too old? How young is too young? Well, there's no Bible passage on that either. The Bible does not say, he must be, 40 years old to 60 years old or whatever. It doesn't say that anywhere.
I think the scriptures say he's not a novice. I mean,
He's not a novice. He's not a new convert, right?
and the thing about it is, you have to gain experience. A person who's going, say he's going to be the CEO or something. We'll say that this person in here, at least to be the CEO of this congregation.
I don't like the idea of using CEO as an analogy for elders, and I'll just say that now.
We'll be under the leadership of the elders. But the sheep don't know not to follow the fold. He has to teach them not to follow the fold, but if they do,
Don looks like he has.
get them out.
Don looks like he has a very eager comment.
The word elder, by its very nature, is definition is so old.
Yes.
Also, being a shepherd, and as an elder, we have the example of the chief shepherd, Jesus,
Yes.
and he came here not as a chief. And that's the nature of the elder, is to be a servant to the congregation. That isn't the intent of an elder. He has no business being an
He
elder.
came and he told us what to do.
The-
There's a pretty good definition of an elder.
He
I
also,
tell you, it's going to be, for whoever elect or if you don't have anybody that you feel like can be, it's going to be a tough job. There's going to be resentment. There's going to be everything. And he's going to have to be the type person that can go around this and bring the congregation together.
Melody, you have something.
that comment, think about the resentment. Made me think that maybe it's a problem that members of the congregation would have. That's not, obviously that's something that the elder needs to address, but resentment isn't something that
But resentment is not something that should exist in any congregation. If it does, there's sin taking place, is usually what it is. And we need to deal with the sin. Fact. Right. Keith.
As far as the age is concerned, can we use the additional information as Paul talks about the prospects of children?
Well, the fact that he has children indicates that he is a certain age, at least. The fact that his children are old enough to choose whether to be faithful or not indicates something. Now, what stage in his life is he when he has that? Well, it's different for every person. Some men have children later than others. Some men have children earlier than others. So there is that element to it as well. That's not the only element. But by and large, it's a matter of judgment. At what point is he mature? At what point is he beyond reproach? Well, some men reach that point in their lives earlier than others do. It's like we talk about age of accountability sometimes. When is a person ready to be baptized? Well, for some people, I was baptized when I was 11. Some people aren't baptized until they're 16. Some people aren't baptized until even later than that. And that's just a fact. There's an age of accountability element of it. And then some people decide after the fact that, maybe I didn't know what I was doing back then, and so I need to be baptized again. Because they look back and they reevaluated their judgment from that time. It's ultimately a judgment call. The Scriptures don't specifically state an age that one has to be or not be to be an elder. There's just the implication given by the existence of faithful children is all we have to go off of. All right. Right, we already got that one. All right. A couple other things. James, did you ever figure out your question that you were going to ask?
Well, it seems to me that the question for me is more along the lines of it's more of a selfish.
I know that look. That's the look I get whenever I had it worded perfectly in my head, and then it comes out completely wrong. Okay.
issue of campaigning for people, is that what you're
Campaigning for people? Ooh, can you campaign for elders? No. Shouldn't.
Not so much as, I mean, we shouldn't, I don't feel like we should be trying to, if there's a person who is capable of being an elder, because we don't want that person to be an elder, doesn't mean that he should be our elder. That's more where I'm trying to go.
There's a tough question, I mean, do we base our, you're not supposed to base any decision based solely on your likes and dislikes, and especially when elders, well, I don't like him. Well, why don't you like him? Do you have some scriptural reason why you don't like him, or is his personality just rub you the wrong way? Well, you need to learn to make a distinction between those two things, because one of those is valid and one of those is not.
Can you repeat that last part?
Okay. Basically, it's like this. What is your objection to appointing an elder? Is your objection to the elder, well, I don't like him. I don't like his personality. It rubs me the wrong way. I don't like the way he presents himself. I don't like this aspect of him. Those are not valid reasons for rejecting an elder. Now, if you have a reason from the Scriptures as to why he's, not qualified, that is a valid objection. But, you don't base your objections on, your likes and dislikes. You base your objections on what God says.
Thank you. Even if I didn't word the question right, you answered it.
All right. I had one more question up. We're low on time, actually. I had one other question up here that I thought was really good that I wanted to get into, but is there a way to remove an elder if he is either not qualified or ceases to be qualified, or, what if he goes mentally unstable in his old age and needs to step down? What do you do in those situations?
Well, normally, let me tell you this. Normally, when an elder becomes, shall I say, ineligible for his job, the other elders step in and take care of that. And if they know what they're doing, they'll do it. I've seen it happen in a lot of congregations where maybe the guy on a tangent or something. And then a lot of elders think because I'm rich, I've got this and this and this, that makes you look up to me. Well, he's wrong. The worst guy in the world normally makes the best elder.
Well, and I think you're right on there. The other elders should have the sense to intervene in that situation.
Well, that's their job.
Yeah. That is definitely up there. Keith, you have something.
Not really.
Oh.
Just that I guess we'll come to the point where we talk about the congregation or responsibility.
Yeah, and that is I think this is a big part of it. I would leave you with one passage of Scripture that I think is relevant to this point in 1 Timothy chapter 5. And I'm going to start in verse 17. Everything in verses 17 to 25 is really relevant to eldership, with the exception of verse 23 where he tells Timothy to take a little wine for his stomach, but that's a parenthetical comment. Beginning in verse 17, the elders who rule well are to be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. For the Scripture says, you shall not muzzle an ox while he is threshing, and the laborer is worthy of his wages. Do not receive an accusation against an elder except on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses. So there's one instance right there where, somebody's bringing a serious accusation against an elder. And the 2 or 3 witnesses is not a special magic rule that was just invented for elders. It's the same rule that Jesus gives for every Christian in Matthew 18. 2 or 3 witnesses, those who continue in sin, rebuke in the presence of all, so that the rest will be fearful of sinning. So, if there's an instance where the elder does not listen to the witnesses, you rebuke him before the whole congregation. And presumably he has to step down in this capacity. You remove the elder. I solemnly charge you, verse 21, in the presence of God and of Christ Jesus and of His chosen angels, to maintain these principles without bias. In other words, don't base it on your likes and dislikes. Doing nothing in a spirit of partiality. Do not lay hands upon anyone too hastily, and thereby share responsibility for the sins of others. Keep yourself free from sin. There's a serious comment right there. You can't just rush into it. You can't just, willy-nilly appoint, well, we got to have elders, so let's do it now and worry about it later. No, he says, do not lay hands on anyone too hastily and share responsibility for the sins of others. If a congregation appoints men too quickly and they are not qualified, that congregation will be held accountable before God. Keep that in mind. Verse 23, no longer drink water exclusively, but use a little wine for the sake of your stomach and for your frequent ailments. Verses 24 and 25, the sins of some men are quite evident, going before them to judgment. So some people are very obvious. Some people are very obvious. They should not be elders, and they're sinning in a very obvious way, and you need to get them out of the picture. For others, their sins follow after. They're a little more subtle. They're a little more insidious, and you've got to watch out for that. Likewise, also, deeds that are good are quite evident, and those which are otherwise cannot be concealed. So there's one thing that is obvious. Good deeds are obvious. If we know good deeds, we should be able to look at somebody and tell whether he is above reproach or not, whether he is qualified or not. Is this man a good deed doer, or is he a bad deed doer? This man what Paul said to Timothy and Titus that he should be, or is he not? That is the judgment we are called to make. We are pretty much out of time for this evening, and if they're assuming no other comments or questions, I guess that's basically where we're going to go. Dennis, I have something from you?
Just one question. My sense of the idea of the 2 or 3 witnesses of the accusation of what's being accused.
In other words, they're eyewitnesses to what the guy did?
Right, not witnesses of the accusation, not witnesses that are just standing around listening to the accusation.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And that's true in Matthew 18 as well, by the way. It's not witnesses to the conversation in Matthew 18.
So if somebody does something evil to you in private, there's no recourse?
If somebody does something to you in private, you show him his sin in private. And, if nobody does anything about it, then what do, right? You either get him to own up to it, or if it's one man's word against another, that's all you have to go off of.
If they're both Christians,
They should.
we don't work these things out, we are not being Christians.
Absolutely correct. Yeah.
Well, if he's doing the same sin to a bunch of people,
That would. Well, I mean, it's like, some congregations I've heard of where, they'll have child molesters and whatnot, and these guy's a repeat offender. And you get so many witnesses up to it. And one man I know had the misfortune of preaching at such a church, and he had to blow the lid off the thing. He had to pull these guys into a room and basically confront them with it. You've got all these people saying this about you. You're doing this behind closed doors. And usually they own up to it because you're confronted with an accusation. You can't deny it. But of course they have to be removed from that.
accusation. How do you bring that accusation if you don't know there's other witnesses?
If you don't know there's other witnesses, I don't have an answer to that other than to say.
What's the question?
The question is, if there's only one witness to a particular sin that's committed, how do you
Address it?
Yeah, how do you address that if it's just one man's word against another? In a lot of cases, it's...
Same as Jim said, Christians, they come together. The Bible gives us what we need to do if you have an office with your brother, go to him first.
Right. Well, and the fact of the matter is if it is one man's word against another and the other guy refuses to own up to it, I mean, there's really nothing you can do except wait for Judgment Day on that point, I would say. And that's a terrible, sad thing that happens, but it has happened before. And, you get what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6, why not rather be wrong? The Lord sees, because ultimately, congregations are judging only in the temporal sense. The Lord is the one who judges in the ultimate sense, and the Lord is the one who knows you are right and who will vindicate you in the final day.
Well,
So
we
then
need
how
to
did that
be
work
very...
with the sexual offender problem?
Well, everybody knew about it.
Okay, so then they must have been sinning by bringing these accusations when there weren't any witnesses.
I don't have a clear answer to that because I don't know all the details, so I can't give you a solid answer on that.
The witnesses could be the victim.
I'm sorry.
The witnesses could be the victim.
That's true. But, well, I don't have a lot more to add to all that. We're actually a little bit off track, but I guess in light of all of these things, I think we may need to have another session to discuss some other things. Continue to submit questions because I think that it's important we discuss these things.
These are things that come up. Something else, but it's identical to what happens in the church.
Right.
And we need to know what we should be close enough as brothers and sisters to be able to go and talk to each other, solve that problem so that it don't fester.
All right. Don, I'm going to say you're the last comment because I said we were done 10 minutes ago.
There's one thing the Bible tells us. If we don't know how to do something in the church, the Bible tells us to study to show ourselves God's working. Don't be ashamed. Actively consult.
Now, it is at this time, of course, since the class is over, most of the people in this audience are, in fact, Christians, but perhaps you are looking at your life and you realize that you're not living a life as Christ would have intended. As Jim pointed out, a person who can't work out his conflicts is not a Christian. There are many other things that, you look at your life and you realize that I'm not living as Christ would have me. Well, if you want to make it right with the Lord, if you want to bring these things to the attention of this congregation, now will be an appropriate time to do so, and let it be known. While together we stand and we sing the song that was selected.